If your ex has suddenly popped up after months of silence, told you things you've been waiting to hear, then vanished into the ether just as quickly as they appeared, what we're unpacking today is 100% for you. But before we begin unpacking, remember to subscribe to the Reconnection Co, pop a like, review or comment on the content, depending on what platform you're joining us on, and let's get into it. So, identifying genuine reconnection versus regulation. This is one of the most important questions you need to find the answer to if either you're thinking of reaching out to your ex or if you're hearing from your ex. Finding the motivator behind these reach outs, again, reconnection versus regulation, will either save you or sabotage you. So today we're going to unpack one of the biggest traps people fall into after a breakup. That is confusing reconnection with regulation, because reaching out when you're in a dysregulated state might feel like relief in the moment, but it rarely ends the way that you hope. And also, if your ex is or has reached out to you, then vanished just as quickly as they appeared, chances are they are reaching out for regulation, not reconnection. So today we're going to unpack the differences between regulation and reconnection and what each may look like in communication. And we're also going to dive into how shitty dating coaches essentially train you to abandon your boundaries and set you up for reliving the pain cycle with your ex. So hopefully you can kick the habit of even being addicted to this dating coach bullshit rubbish as well. And lastly, I want to cover how you can build and flex some of those boundaries you've been working on with either yourself, i.e. your internal boundaries, or with your ex if they reach out. That is our interpersonal boundaries. So let's start with the basics. What is regulation versus reconnection? Now, regulation is what your nervous system is trying to do when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling anxious, panicked, or heartbroken. It's essentially trying to come back to baseline. And often, after a breakup, your go-to source of regulation was the person who just left, because your brain is wired for the neurochemical rewards of that connection: dopamine, norepinephrine, oxytocin. And dopamine and norepinephrine are two of our key players when we're talking about addiction. Now, in episode 5 of the Reconnection Co podcast, we did explore this a bit more in depth. So if you're wanting to dive into that specific topic and the physiology of heartbreak, that episode is a good starting point for you. So if we're talking about dysregulation, what does this actually mean? Dysregulation refers to a state where your nervous system is overwhelmed and you're unable to return to emotional or physiological baseline. It means that your internal state has shifted into survival mode and you've essentially temporarily lost access to clarity, calm, and grounded decision making. So in simple terms, you're not in danger, but your brain and body think that you are. Now, dysregulation can be triggered by almost anything. Sometimes it's not even in relation to your ex. Work stress, for example. And for those of us on the neurospicy spectrum, or not, sensory overload, this can be one. So too much light, too much noise, too much input in general can set it up and set it off. Or something can be X-related. So a song or a smell triggering a memory or feeling that you're not even consciously aware of. So you might walk past someone who wears the same perfume as your ex. Or if you're lucky enough to get one of the big hitters, you might randomly bump into your ex. Either way, a trigger appears and a dysregulation spiral has begun. Now, dysregulation can occur in anyone, but for those of us with attachment injuries, unresolved trauma, or trauma processing that's still a work in progress, and even neurospice, we can be a little bit more susceptible to dysregulation spirals coming knocking. The symptoms of dysregulation will typically depend on what your nervous system's response is, and this is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And many people will often have a default response, but not always. Either way, being aware of the symptoms is a great way to build your self-awareness and your ability to regulate yourself out of these spirals if they do occur. So essentially we've got hyper and hypoarousal states. So hyperarousal, hyper is more or too much. So hyperarousal will be our fight and or flight response. And this is often some of the things that you might see, like racing thoughts, rapid heartbeat, agitation or panic, or compulsive behaviors like texting your ex or doom scrolling. So hyper means we increase things. So this is the racing thoughts, the rapid heartbeat, so things increase. But then the opposite side of this, we have hypoarousal. So hypo is less. So hypoarousal governs or encapsulates our freeze and fawn responses. So it may look like numbness or shutting down, feeling spaced out or disconnected, emotional flatness or hopelessness. And people that enter the fawn response, it's often driven by some of these people-pleasing behaviors or even just going into silence to avoid conflict. Now, in either case, regardless of if you're hyper or hypoaroused, you're no longer in a regulated state. It's our regulated state where reflection, clarity, and good choices live. Dysregulation is often what drives our bad choices. So for a little bit of neurochemistry in regards to dysregulation, when we're dysregulated, the brain's limbic system takes over. So the limbic system is the part of your brain that manages emotion, memory, and survival instincts. It includes structures like the amygdala, which is often referred to as like the reptilian or the old brain, and the hippocampus. And it's all responsible for detecting threats and triggering your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So when the limbic hijack is at play, we've got these guys jumping behind the wheel. The amygdala, which governs our fear detection, the hypothalamus, which governs our stress response, and the brainstem, which triggers a lot of our automatic survival reactions. And then these guys trigger a flood of stress chemicals like cortisol, which is our stress hormone, adrenaline, which activates the fight or flight response. And then we also see suppression of the prefrontal cortex, which is what's in charge of our decision making and logic centers. So if that's suppressed, then we're not going to be making really sound, logically informed decisions. And we also see lower levels of serotonin and dopamine, which makes it hard to feel calm, grounded, or motivated. So when you're dysregulated, you're literally not thinking clearly. You are in a survival state. Now, the opposite of this is regulation. Regulation is when we can return to safety. So regulation is about helping your nervous system shift out of survival mode and back to a state where you feel safe, clear, emotionally balanced, and are able to pause before reacting. And it's in this regulated space where real connection or healthy disconnection can happen. So what happens with dysregulation and connection? Essentially, you spiral. You think you need to reach for them, or you're wanting them to reach for you, a text or a phone call, essentially something that comes like, I'm thinking of you, essentially a breadcrumb. And it's not because you're ready to reconnect, but it's because you just need the spiral to stop. Your brain and body are chasing a reward, a dopamine hit, to essentially try and get you out of this limbic hijack. So when we've got the limbic hijack trying to do what it thinks you need at the time, a dysregulated drive for relief. So it's chasing emotional pain relief, not relationship clarity. On the other hand, reconnection is about mutual readiness, and it involves emotional accountability, demonstration of actionable change, a clear intention to repair, not just a check-in or a breadcrumb. So essentially it's the difference between, hey, I'm sorry I hurt you, I've been reflecting on my part and I'd like to talk about reconnecting in a healthier way, versus, hey, just thinking about you, hope you're okay. If it's vague, it is likely guilt-driven and they're chasing regulation. So essentially if it's one-sided, it's not reconnection. It is them trying to regulate, or it could be you trying to regulate. So let's walk through a real example. Let's say it's been a few months or weeks and you've been doing okay, but then you see a photo or hear a song, or like an example I've used before, you might smell someone wearing the same perfume as your ex, or they pop up in your feed. For some reason, the algorithm thinks that it needs to recommend you reconnecting with people you've removed from your social media accounts, or again, you bump into them at the gym or at the shops. Suddenly, boom, your limbic system comes online. The sensations differ for everyone, but it might be like your chest tightening, you feel nauseous, and all you want is regulation to get you out of this survival state that your limbic system has kicked you into. So after a few minutes, you might start thinking, should I just send them a quick message just to check in? So you tell yourself things like, maybe we could be friends, maybe they miss me. Literally, if this is happening, just pause and ask yourself, do I feel emotionally grounded right now? Do I have any of the symptoms of hyper or hypoarousal that we've spoken about? So remember, racing thoughts, rapid heartbeat, agitation, numbness, feeling spaced out. Are we feeling emotionally flat? Essentially, ask yourself via a body check-in, am I panicked, lonely, and or needing to fix something inside of me by reaching to someone outside of me, in this case, your ex? If the answer lands at you trying to get out of a limbic hijack, the urge isn't about them. It's about trying to soothe something painful fast. You're chasing relief, you're chasing regulation, you're not chasing genuine reconnection. And this is where breakup advice often gets dangerous, because toxic dating coaches online will tell you things like, disappear so they'll chase you, give them space and then they'll come back. Be low maintenance. If they swing back around, don't bring up the past. Essentially, don't hold them accountable for their shitty behavior and the emotional damage that their behavior caused. That's not empowerment, that is fawning. It teaches you to self-abandon, to suppress your needs and emotions, to stay quiet, and essentially to leave your boundaries at the door, just to be chosen again. If you need to suppress everything about you just to have someone come back and choose you, that is not healthy. If someone is really ready to reconnect, to be accountable, and truly understands what they did wrong, they will have grown enough to sit through an uncomfortable conversation about the impact of their actions. If they can't sit through the discomfort of a conversation like that, you can guarantee that they have not done the work to be a healthy partner, and you can almost guarantee that they will ripcord out of your dynamic again as soon as their discomfort levels rise again. So how do you actually build and flex some healthy behaviors to protect yourself if your ex resurfaces again? This is essentially if they message you and you head into a conversation. Now, you won't get the full accountability thesis on the first message or contact, or if you do, it's an exceptional rarity. So you don't have to come out swinging with accountability queries in response to their first text or reach out, but you are allowed to call out their contact early. So calling it out might sound something like, hey, I appreciate your message, but I need to understand your intention here. Are you wanting to reconnect and actually catch up, or are you just checking in? And you can see where things go from there. But whatever their response is, and again, bear in mind, nothing follows a strict script. So you essentially will just see how it plays out. But then, however the conversation plays out, reflect and ask yourself, did they apologize or show any form of accountability or growth? Did they name the harm that they caused me in response to their behavior? Or did they offer any insight or change? Or literally, did they just check in with a breadcrumb? You are 100% allowed to call out their contact early. If they hurt you and demonstrated a ton of shitty behavior, either during your relationship, during the breakup, or after things ended, the price of re-entry into your life is accountability, apologies, and actionable change. It is not your job to fawn to their emotional shortcomings, because to be honest, you probably did that in the relationship anyway. And how did it leave you feeling? Not fantastic. Baby boundaries, then we build our bigger boundaries, and we grow so we don't tolerate shitty behavior again. It is okay to do that and to call them out. And if they vanish after you query their intentions, good. You've just saved yourself from round 2 or round 20 of heartbreak. People who are ready to reconnect won't be scared by you questioning and having a difficult conversation about why they're back in contact with you. They'll respect it and they will lean into having the uncomfortable conversation. If they can't face having these conversations and they can't face seeing the impact of their actions and behavior on you, they haven't faced themselves and whatever their inner wounds are yet, at least not to a point when they're able to be healthy for you. And so if their response to a boundary that you put in place is to ghost, guilt, or avoid, that's all the clarity that you need, that they are not going to be a healthy partner for you. And yes, putting these boundaries in place, it still hurts, and boundaries 100% are not comfortable or easy, especially if you have a history of trauma. It will still likely fuel some of your trauma and your sort of inner narrative about self-worth. Like, why aren't I worth them apologizing to and working on themselves? Why are they off living their best life and I'm still wading through the complete shit pit of pain this relationship and breakup has caused? Hint, they're probably not living their best life, at least not internally. They're probably performing and projecting externally, because that's what avoidance is. So, revisiting boundaries. Boundaries are the limits and rules you set to protect your emotional, physical, and psychological well-being. They help define what you will and won't accept in relationships. They're not there to control others, but they are there to stay connected to yourself. They're important because they can hopefully protect you from repeated harm. They help you create emotional safety in your world. They help build your own self-respect and trust, but also help others build self-respect and trust for you. And importantly, especially in the dating and relationship context, they help filter out people who can't meet you in a healthy, reciprocal way. Without boundaries, you're not connecting, you are contorting. And for those of us that have a history of trauma, especially if it's related to childhood, oftentimes boundaries are very difficult for us. So especially for those of us that are recovering from CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorders. So oftentimes we grew up in environments where we did have to contort ourselves to essentially survive the emotional labyrinth that we're existing in as children. And this influences how we behave in relationships. So boundaries can be very difficult, but there is boundary work that we can do. So if you want to dive into boundaries a little bit more in depth, in episode 6 of the Reconnection Co podcast, we talked about how boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection. And in episode 7 and the accompanying guided journal session that I put together for that, which is available on YouTube, we talk about building boundaries and emotional safety. So remember that the Reconnection Co podcast is available on YouTube and Spotify, but the guided journaling sessions are only available on YouTube in one of the playlists that I've created. But essentially, real no contact isn't I'm withdrawing my attention so you miss me. It's I'm stepping away because I can't keep reopening this wound for someone who won't help it heal. And if your ex returns to your life, the boundaries that you create doesn't or shouldn't dissolve. It should expand. And what I mean by expanding is when we're in healthy relationships and have healthy relationship dynamics around us, we grow into being better people, being stronger people. So our boundaries and standards, they should be improving and expanding. So regardless of this, if your ex circles back again, you are allowed to say, if we're going to try again, it can't be like last time. These are my needs, these are my expectations, and these are my boundaries. This is what I require for emotional safety and what I need at a bare minimum for me to even consider stepping back into this. If they're not ready to meet that, they're not ready to reconnect. End of story. Now, if you're back in contact with your ex, communicating your boundaries, you're communicating your needs and expectations to help identify if they're ready to reconnect, that's great. But we also need to have some awareness of if we are ready to reconnect. So if you're wanting to reach out to your ex, you 100% need to ask yourself, am I regulated right now, or am I reaching for regulation? i.e., am I regulated versus dysregulated? So some signs that you are regulated is you feel calm, clear, and grounded. You can pause before taking action, or you can pause before reacting to something. You feel safe in your body. You can reflect on your emotions without spiraling, and you can reflect on how you feel internally. So you can identify emotions, you can identify feelings. You're essentially just grounded and at peace. And you're able to say no without guilt, which, well, to be fair, some of us just operate out of a place of guilt, CPTSD in action. Another thing, or another sign that you are regulated, is you can tolerate discomfort without needing immediate relief. But then the antithesis of this, so some signs that you might be dysregulated. You might have some racing thoughts or emotional overwhelm. You have a lot of these urges to act impulsively. So you want to text your ex or you want to lash out, and it might be lashing out in response to a feeling that you're having. You might be feeling numb, shut down, or disassociated. Or if you're in sort of more of the hyper aroused state, it might be some anxiety or panic or irritability. Some of the slower burn symptoms of dysregulation, it could be you're having difficulty sleeping, you're not eating as much, or there's changes in your eating behaviours. So some people, they go hyper, they binge, eat too much, or they go hypo, they don't eat much, lose their appetite. So essentially, if you're dysregulated, you're often, and your limbic system's often chasing something out of desperation to try and fix or soothe something, and you kind of want that immediate relief or immediate effect. So if you feel like you have to do something now and it can't wait an hour, that's a little bit of a hint that dysregulation is in charge. Now, some other questions to ask, which in all fairness can be difficult to answer, and that is, if you message your ex or you reach out to them and they don't reply, how will you feel? Will you spiral? And this essentially boils down to, have I healed enough to see them clearly? Have I smashed the rose-colored glasses that I often looked at them through? Can I name and feel both the good and the bad of them and the relationship as a whole? If you're still hoping for closure, still afraid to speak your truth, still willing to drop your needs and boundaries just to have them back, you are not ready to reconnect. And to be honest, neither are they. So you deserve a reconnection that comes with change, not chaos, with clarity, not breadcrumbs. And the more regulated you become, the less you'll crave someone who couldn't meet you there. So if this episode resonated with you, please like it, share it, and if you know someone who might benefit from it, share it with someone who's stuck in that loop of reaching out and then inevitably regretting it. And lastly, make sure you follow the Reconnection Co on Spotify or YouTube, where I am dropping new episodes every Monday. At this stage, my studies and clinical work are ramping up, so it might move to fortnightly. I'm just seeing how it goes over the next few weeks because, things are getting busy. And also, if you're wanting bite-sized content in between my longer form episodes, I post shorter videos during the week over on YouTube, which is where you can also find the guided journaling playlist. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next week.